Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you happen to be in the world. It's great to have you along to another of the In Conversation with Graeme Codrington series. Please go across to the chat box. Evan, you've got in first. I think you've been in first a few times. You must know how the system works. And just say hi to us. Let us know where you're from. Ronald from a sunny Johannesburg. I'm also in Johannesburg. Sunny, yes. Cold also. But it's great to have you along to the conversation. I think it's a good sign that in the middle of a Wednesday afternoon, we don't have too many people joining us live. I know a lot of people have said they're really excited about this conversation, but we'll be watching the replay. Whether you're live, whether you're on the replay, it's great to have you in conversation. This series was designed to answer a very simple question. If you've got over the crisis of COVID, and that's a big if, because there's still a lot of crisis involved in all of our lives and our businesses. But once you've kind of realized you're dealing with the crisis, how do you shift yourself to what happens next? That might be an opportunity mindset. It might be, oh, good grief, the stuff we were doing isn't working anymore, or isn't working as well as we needed to. And I've been looking around my network for people I wanted to speak to. And I think Brad and Andy have been on a few of these before, so they know that I'm lying if I say I haven't said this to everybody. But these two guys are my favorites. No, but seriously, Brad and Andy, this is for those of you, sorry, let me do an introduction because you're seeing their smiling faces and they're waiting patiently to contribute. Brad Shorkend, Andy Golding are the authors of what I think was South Africa's best business book of the last 12 months. There's some great contenders for that title, but their book is called We Are Still Human and Work Shouldn't Suck. And that's more than a book title. I think that's their life mottos. It's the goal of their business. Their business is called Still Human. So Brad and Andy, it's really great to be chatting to you. I'm a huge fan of your work. You know that. I'm a huge fan of your book. You know that even more. Full disclosure, I did write the foreword to the book. Didn't get paid anything for it, not getting paid anything for this webinar. I do it because I genuinely believe that Brad and Andy have got some insight into how work should work, into how we should engage with the workplace. And I think that their work is even more important now than it was. So guys, I'm going to step back because I know you guys both can handle the stage really well. And I'm just going to throw a question at you. Why is employee experience even more important now during COVID and what's going to happen with the disruption coming after we've dealt with COVID? Why is employee experience probably the most important thing we should be talking about? Okay, and we have to in alphabetical order of first names. Andy, I'll throw that question to you.
Okay, cool. Sorry, B-Rad.
Go for it.
Graeme, you know, there's a quote that comes right at the beginning of our book, and it's by Pascal Finet of Singularity University, and he says, human beings, people are not a resource. They are the source. They are the source of everything a company does. And a company is actually nothing other than the capability and the contributions of its people. And every business has been hit in some way, shape, or form by what's going on with this global pandemic. And especially for the knowledge-based businesses, the businesses that rely on people's contributions, people's efforts, people's energy, people's intellectual horsepower. If the human beings in our businesses are being switched off and depleted, we aren't accessing them at their highest levels of contribution. If the human beings are being switched on and grown, we have access to their headspace, their heart space, their actions at an exponential level. And that's what employee experience is. It's, are people being switched off and depleted, or are they being switched on and grown? And now, more than ever, when we're relying on the human beings in our business to hold it together, to hold down the fort, to make magic, we have to be making sure that people are being switched on and grown.
So in actual fact, I'm going to change my first question, and I'm going to throw this one at Brad then. Why was this important 6 months ago. I mean, the title, the cover of your book has got a guy who's like a half robot and all the rest. So you've been saying that this issue of employee experience and engaging people, making sure that they switched on, not switched off. I mean, you guys have been talking about this for years and years, and your book was a passion project in 2018, 2019. Why was it important, even before we got into COVID and everybody's working from home?
So, Graeme, I think that's a really good adaptation of the question. It was important because we talk about going back to better humaning in a world gone digital crazy, how to build businesses for human beings in a world gone digital crazy. Because no matter how much we digitize, how much technology is applied, how much we go to robotics, it is all still for human beings. Human beings are still the ideators and they are still the users. So we're designing a digital and mechanized world, but for human consumption and human experience. However, we've forgotten how to be human. The obsession became around building our businesses for digital, applying and using digital. We forgot how to connect as human beings, how to treat each other as human beings. And to the point Andy raised at the beginning in her response to the first question was, we've still got to think about switching on and growing human beings, because all of the great adaptations of technology, of tooling, are human-driven. They're being driven by organizations that are authorizing and allowing people to shine. However, that takes real humaning to invite people to shine, to bring their best energies, enthusiasms, participation, and intelligence. Mm-hmm. But then if we take the world gone digital crazy that we spoke about and designed humaning for, and why it was so important just 6 months ago, now we're in a world that has been, we were becoming digitally disconnected. We're now digitally reconnected. However, have we humanly reconnected? Is why this is becoming such a critical conversation. Are we humanly reconnecting?
Absolutely. And you know what? I'm really glad that we, just by way of scheduling, I wish I could claim it was complete design, but I'm really glad that I'm speaking to you guys a little bit later in this lockdown process, because I think if we had had this conversation in the early days of lockdown, even myself, I might have been tempted. You guys would have probably corrected me, but I might have been tempted to ask questions along the lines of, how do we make sure people are more productive? How do we make sure that our team is still, and I know we use a word that you guys have a love-hate with, engaged. And the question would have come from my clients begging me to help them to work out, how can I manage my team better, which basically means how can I look over their shoulders now that they're staying at home? How can I get them more productive, which means how can I suck more juice out of them and get them to do more? I've been horrified, actually, by the number of people I've heard in the business world where the only good thing they've really got to say about their team in the last 8 weeks is how hard their team has worked. And as much as that could be a compliment, I'm nervous that it's not. I'm nervous that that sounds like a taskmaster saying, my team's basically, falling flat on their back with exhaustion, but well done, guys, well done. That's not what you guys are talking about, right? Your focus is not about how to get more out of your human resources. It's about how to become more human in the system. There's no question there. Just pick up the conversation. I just am glad I'm speaking to you guys now, because I think people have to hear a message that's important in the moment now in COVID.
Thanks. So I have a fundamental belief. I have two fundamental beliefs actually around this stuff. The first is that I believe the headspace and the heart space of human beings is the most untapped natural resource on the planet. And for the most part, businesses do a terrible job of tapping into that. And possibly one of the biggest contributing factors to that is fundamental belief number 2, which is great leaders, exceptional leaders, are not born, they're created. I believe that no person should be allowed into a position of leadership without adequate training, because otherwise we're setting people up for failure. And this whole pandemic work from home situation has been a micromanager's worst nightmare. an absolute nightmare for them.
Yeah.
And it's very telling. The leaders who are saying, you know, I'm so proud of my team for how hard they've worked. You've got to question, where are they leading from? What's the skills base that leaders are leading from? And it's a very rare person who shows up every day wanting to be a terrible leader and wanting to create bad experiences for their people. It's generally just a lack of skills, lack of knowledge, and lack of framework from which to lead to create magic in these scenarios. So those leaders aren't bad people for saying things like that. I just think they're lacking a little bit of perspective of what good leadership actually is and what great business actually comes from, which is great human input.
And so, Andy, are you seeing a similar thing then to what I'm seeing, that leaders who might have been getting away with it 6 months ago, by getting away with it, I mean, they didn't realize they were micromanagers. They would have sworn blind that they wouldn't. As you say, not one of them arrived at work thinking, how can I make things horrible for everybody around me? But they were getting away with it because the business was just flowing along in a particular line. So they had probably got experience. They had come up through the ranks. That's how they got promoted. They just needed to make sure that the cogs were oiled. Now the whole machine, this is going to be a very labored analogy by the time I'm finished, but the whole machine's fallen apart, or I don't know what's happened. You know, we've run out of juice or petrol, or we don't need this machine, we need a different machine. And now suddenly these leaders have discovered they're not quite the leaders they thought they were. At the moment, my suspicion is they're probably blaming their people, to saying, I don't think my people, my team, are quite the team I thought they were. Whereas actually there's a leadership issue going on here. Am I hearing you correctly? Is you seeing what you were suspecting was happening with the digital crisis that was coming has now definitely happened with the COVID crisis?
Without a doubt. It's, you know, you can't fly an Airbus with the skills required, you know, if you've only ever flown a biplane.
Yeah.
You need a completely different skill set. And I think a lot of leaders you could have gotten by with the biplane flying skills up until the system fell apart, we ran out of gas, whichever analogy we want to go with. But now there's nowhere to hide. And I think it's been a very scary time for a lot of leaders who are trying to do the best that they can, but can only work with what they've got.
Yeah. So, Brad, what are some of the challenges that you are seeing people? I know you guys have got long-term clients. You're working in this employee experience space. What are some of the things you guys have been seeing from an employee experience / engagement space during COVID? Is it just more of the same? Is some of the stuff you were seeing exacerbated, or are there new things, or all of the above?
So I think there's an important consideration. You asked earlier, why is this more important, or why was it important 6 months ago? Why is it important now in employee experience conversation? I think it's important now because it wasn't enough under the spotlight back then. Employee experience has been a growing theme and a growing context.
That makes sense.
We nearly given enough emphasis by leaders, by organizations. Now it's right there under the spotlight because humans have been impacted significantly. It's there under the spotlight because we're being told we must be more empathetic and people are having a rough time. And there's a lot of this, it's almost lip service in many contexts, because then the challenges to the question you've just asked links to what Andy just shared. Leaders have been exposed, many leaders, and I'm using a cautious generalization in terms of the fact that they now had to wake up in the morning, which they should be doing anyway. When they're going to work in the morning in the car, the one thing a leader should be thinking about is, what am I going to do today to switch on and grow my human beings? Yes, I have the organization's strategic intentions. I understand what we need to deliver. I understand the shareholders' objectives. I'm going to get there by switching the people on. Now we're not driving to work, and we have to be having the same conversation. The challenge is, I think for me, the most critical challenge, and it's been a leadership challenge and it's been a participant challenge, an employee challenge, has been people don't know how they're being measured because they don't have the micromanager leaning over the shoulder going, yes, no, maybe. So people are sitting at home having almost a panicked expectation of, I need to prove myself. So what we do is we're spending 15, 16 hours with our bum in our chair, online, waiting to be pinged. whilst dealing with little Johnny and little Lisa who need to be dealt with as well.
I think it's worse than that, Brad. I think we're making work. So people are sending emails they wouldn't have sent before just to prove that they're still at their desk. They're scheduling Zoom meetings just to prove that they're having meetings. I think this is happening in every industry. I'm horrified by what some teachers of schools are doing, sending like 83 pages of work home because I have to prove to this parent who made some snotty comment about teachers are not working hard enough that I'm working hard. And I think everybody's got into busy work rather than clever work in order to just prove to themselves and their bosses that they are in fact working and being productive.
I think that is standing out as one of the biggest challenges and it comes down to a conversation around trust. Trust that I am doing what I need to be doing. But in order for me to know what I need to be doing, this is probably one of the most critical shifts required from leaders. People need to understand how are they being measured. And it's not by what they did, it's by the impact that they had. Leaders need to be able to tell the story, create a broader lens, showing people this is the impact you have when you do this. So at the end of the day, the 2 days, the week, somebody can say, this is the impact I had, not this is what I did. Because that's ticking the boxes. And that becomes a different way of creating value. It's about value now.
I like that language, Brad, because I often talk about shifting from an inputs-based mindset to an outputs-based mindset. So don't measure how many hours I spent doing the thing, just measure that I did the thing. And if it takes me 6 hours, then that's fine. If it takes me 16 hours, also fine. Who cares about the hours? Did you get the thing done? You're taking that a step further there, and you saying it's not just about your outputs, it's about your impact. Help me understand that a little bit. I like it, but
so if we're just looking at outputs, I got the thing done. We've been working. So I've heard you. I mean, I've watched a lot of what you've been saying during this time on various webinars, and one of the many very powerful things you said was we can't be expecting high performance right now. It's almost unreasonable. People are stressed out. Understand, people are just barely getting by. They're distracted and they're stressed. And that impacts performance capability. Yep. We've taken that as a consideration, be empathetic, understand where everybody is at. Everyone's having a different experience of this, but we're all having a tough time. But we then went forward and said, however, our byline at the moment is business continuity through human continuity. Business does need to carry on. We need to keep creating improvement. That's what business does. It can create improvement financially, economically, technologically, medically, whatever the case might be, societally. But for that to happen, human beings need to be accessed. Now, that means we do need to achieve performance. So we've been working with a formula that we crafted, which says performance is a product of people's willingness. Are they actually wanting to participate? Have you created trust, buying, enthusiasm, excitement, willingness to participate, multiplied by their ability? Are they capable? Are they skilled up? Are they equipped? And multiplied by their authorization. Have they been invited and authorized to participate? Divided, all of those divided by the relevance. Is what they are doing relevant? Now that goes to the impact point, because I might have done what I was told to do, but did it in any way make the boat go faster? Did it take us forward? Otherwise, I'm busy for the sake of being busy. And that's what we mean. It's people understanding where they plug in, what the relevance is of what they're doing, how it impacts people left, right, above and below, and outside. And now I can be performing into a relevance construct and measuring my impact.
Brilliant. I love that. And Annie and Brad, but this is what you guys do so well, is you take a lot of these thoughts and these ideas and you put them into really useful frameworks and practical tools that people can use. Annie, what do you see as some of the challenges that are bubbling up at the moment, and then some of the ways in which we can respond to those?
So Brad touched on something just now. He started to speak about the trust conversation and trust deficits. And I think as South African businesses around the world, we struggle with trust. We have massive trust deficits in our business. Graeme, you said something about people making work. They're creating busy work as opposed to doing clever work. Well, when there's a lack of psychological safety, and I think that I'm in this mode of watch my back, and I have to prove to the people around me that I'm working, that I'm on my game, that I'm doing great things, we create this busyness. We create busy work. And I think for me, what's been exposed in many organizations is this complete lack of psychological safety. You know, our definition, we have a model of the 12 critical components of creating employee experience. And the thing that holds all of those together is what we call the container or the force field of trust. Because if trust is broken, everything else falls apart. And our definition of trust is that we are safe to think, express, experiment, and learn. And we always have each other's backs. And in an office face-to-face environment, if we didn't have each other's backs, but we still had people who we could kind of collude with, and people who would, you know, people who were in our little cliques, that's fine. But now we've all gone remote, and suddenly, if you had a trust problem, that's just been amplified because now it's really every man for himself. Because Brad and I can't be like, no, we were working on something together the whole day, because nobody can see that.
Yeah. And I think Sylvia's brought in a great point. Just by the way, if you are with us live, one of the advantages of being live is you get to ask questions and we will answer them. So use the chat box to throw them in. But Sylvia's added something in which I think just links up exactly with what we're saying here. AI, she asks about AI and the fear of being replaced by AI. And it's just made that connection in my head right this moment. That part of the fear people have of the digital revolution is, I'm not going to be relevant anymore. And if I'm not relevant, then maybe I don't have a job anymore. And that's precisely the fear that a lot of people are in at the moment, isn't it? So it really, there's a primal fear of losing my job, losing my relevance, losing my significance as a human being. And that's, thanks, Sylvia. That's actually helped put words to why I know that the stuff that Andy and Brad do is so important at the moment. So guys, how do we help people then? Everybody knows that they're in a crisis. Everybody knows that they're in a challenge. I think most people understand it's the people that are a big part of the challenge. Where should a leader in a business start in terms of beginning to engage here? Brad, you want to take that?
Yeah. So I think a leader and a colleague, anybody, the starting point is the same, and that's to demonstrate care. Before anything, demonstrate care. Andy and I, we have every morning, we have a huddle, our business, and with various colleagues join us at times as well, because we're a scaling business. It's called a shuttle. It's a still human huddle. Now, we've all heard about different types of huddles, and they've all got different constructs. But our huddle, even though it's very organic and it goes in different directions, it has a basic framework. The first question is, how are you? Before we discuss anything else, how are you? And we've both had moments of expressing how we are. Sometimes there's often lots of laughter, but other times there's like, I had a really crap day yesterday, and I'm struggling with this or this or this. But it's a place of safety where you can just be vulnerable, because as Andy mentioned earlier, our construct for trust and for partnering is having each other's backs, knowing that care comes first. Then for anybody, again, I think clarity is the most important thing. There is so much uncertainty right now. People don't know what to think, what to do, where to put their feet while crossing the river, which stones can you trust to put your foot on. We need to be intentional around creating clarity. Make sure that we know what it is we're looking to communicate. Make sure that somebody else understood. If we have an expectation of someone, make sure they understand the expectation. It will reduce so much of the anxiety that we're experiencing working, as we call it, dislocated. Not remote, dislocated, because we are. And if you understand the pain that goes with dislocation, how do you ease the pain? Create comfort. So what do we need to do to create comfort? These will be contributors to people being able to show up, participate, and potentially perform at higher levels in what is a very difficult time, as we said, to perform. I think those are two critical things. And then just manage expectation carefully.
Yeah.
You know, most disappointment is through unmet expectations. So make sure expectation is realistic and clear.
So, Brad, what do you say to a manager who says, "Oh, I mean, that sounds fantastic. We just don't have the time for that. We just, you know, you might have noticed we're in the middle of a global pandemic and we're in a crisis, and you know, so I conceptually I like the idea of kind of caring and connecting, but we just don't have the time."
So that would probably be the same leader who was saying that 6 months ago as well. And
yeah.
It's interesting. Andy and I we just co-authored a piece for a book, and the title of the piece was "We didn't think we had enough time until we had no choice." And it talks to what we all experienced here. We better get set up to be remote in just a couple of weeks. And I think that thing goes to a lot of other things, because what we speak a lot about with leaders is this concept of not having enough time to be curious, to invite other people's participation. That is actually an investment. That is time being invested. The return on your investment is people being able to think and do their own thing without hassling you the whole time as the managing or micromanaging leader. People being able to get it right first time, as opposed to getting stuck with duplication, because that 1% extra investment was made in clarification and in showing care versus them shutting down. It's an investment. And we need to change the construct of "I don't have time." It is an investment, and it's a bad idea.
So relationships are not a chore; they're an investment. They're essential part of the system. And Andy, can I give the flip side of that question to you about, if you're not the leader, if you're trying to handle a leader who's not doing this stuff? Ronald has sent a message. I don't know if he intended it to be a private message. Well, too late, Ronald. Sorry, I've just announced to the world that you did. But he argues, that part of the problem is that we might have leaders above us who don't understand this stuff, and that we might be stuck in a system where we can kind of see clearly what the problem is. Any advice that you could give if you are working for somebody who is like one of the leaders that we've been talking about?
Sure. So the first thing that comes to mind is your leaders, just like you, are human beings. And in moments of humanness and vulnerability would quite possibly admit that they're as scared as you are, they're as unsure, they're trying to do the best they can, working with what they've got. And there's a couple of ways to address this, and it's so situational, but there's always merit in having the conversation with the leader. Having the conversation and just trying to open up their thinking and coming from a place of kindness and not a place of judgment or chastising, but a place of, I want to help you as a leader make magic for the rest of us. And it's a scary thing to go into those conversations with leaders, but the majority of the time what we see happening is they start out quite uncomfortable, but very quickly dissolve into deeply human, meaningful conversations. Because no matter how digital crazy the world goes, no matter how remote distributed we are all still human beings. And we often forget that. We tend to put our leaders on these pedestals and put them on this unapproachable pedestal. So that's the first thing I would say is try to have the conversation, open up the conversation.
Andy, that makes a lot of sense to me, that, we're saying that employees need to be treated as if they were still human beings, because they are. Actually, the simple answer is, well, your leaders need to be treated as if they are still human beings, because they are. So maybe you should step up and ask your leader the question. Even if they're not asking you, you ask them the care questions and then demonstrate care to them. I'm thinking of a very cheesy example, but I heard of a leader the other day who just sent flowers to everybody in her team, just had them delivered. This was when lockdown eased and deliveries were available. And I think she sent flowers to some and chocolates to the other, and she knew enough about the members of her team to know which was more valuable. I wonder if she got flowers. I wonder if anybody in a team is just send some flowers to your boss to say, hey, boss, thanks. These are tough times. I know you've got so much to do, so much. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, you give me a thought there. around, making sure that everybody's still human, right? Or at least that's how it should be. Sorry, I interrupted you, Andy. Yeah.
So, and I love that story so much because it's not a massive gesture. It's an entirely non-work related gesture, but rather it's an acknowledgement of our humanity, and that how you've reversed it of, did anybody send the boss flowers? It's so often we put leaders on pedestals, but leaders themselves also start to kind of think, well, I have to distance myself. I have to step away. And those are also, that's just something that we need leaders to work through. And that again comes through to the leadership skills conversation we were having earlier. But another really important point that I want to make is, Ronald, you as a human being, you may lead people and you may work with people. And every single day you're showing up in your interactions with your colleagues and you're creating that either they're being switched on and grown or they're being switched off and depleted. So I fully acknowledge that a whole lot of the employee experience lives with leaders and is created by leaders. But as employees, we also have a massive responsibility for the experience that we create for our colleagues and for the people we're interacting with on a day-to-day basis, on a moment-to-moment basis. And it's so often it's a fear thing. We don't want to go embark on that conversation with the boss. The AI conversation that Sylvia raised, it's a fear thing. And I like to think of fear as, you're standing at the doorway to a pitch black room. It's pretty scary because you don't know what's there. You don't know what you might trip over. You don't know what obstacles are in your way. But what invariably happens every time you step into a dark room, you step in and your eyes adjust. And slowly, slowly, you can start to see what's in front of you and what's there. And you can start to quite creatively and quite strategically make your way through that room. And that's generally what anything around fear is, just stepping into that dark room, let your eyes adjust, take another step, let your eyes adjust, and just keep going step by step. And that's really the only way that we can be moving at the moment. Brad spoke about, where do you place your feet when you're crossing the rapids? What are the rocks that you're looking for that you can place your feet on? You can only do that step by step. We're in a transitional, fluid, unfolding global pandemic situation. We can only do this step by step.
Guys, I think we've officially broken the record for the most number of analogies used in any of my webinars. We've gone from biplanes to broken machines to crossing rivers and dark rooms. But I mean, this is part of the genius that you guys bring, and people can just see glimpses in the background of both of your walls there of the type of art and picturing that you guys use in order to get the message across. So for those people who are now down to half an hour webinar limits, just very, very quickly, if you do want to contact Andy and Brad, stillhuman.co.za is the website to go to. I absolutely say that their book, We Are Still Human, is essential reading, and even more essential reading now. It's not one of those books where you're going to go back and read and go, oh, well, if only they'd thought of COVID. This was a book about how to engage with disruption. So check them out and have a look. But guys, to you, just watching the time, a final question, which is kind of what I've been building up to, is to say, if all of these things that we've said are true, and we all kind of have a sense of what we should be doing, then if we think now of how COVID in particular has changed the world and what might happen over the next few months and years, what are some of the most critical elements of employee experience? I know you guys have got a whole massive process and formula that you use, and people can look at your website and connect with you to get the full detail. But what would you guys say are the most critical elements of employee experience and culture that businesses should be focusing on right now?
Go for it, Brad.
Okay, Brad, you go for it.
I think moving forward,
just Brad, you know why Andy asked you to go first, because she wants the last word. I see how the relationship works. I see how it works. Anyway,
I think for me, what I said earlier about this wasn't in the spotlight, employee experience as a theme, as an intentionality, wasn't sufficiently in the spotlight before. I'm asking all the leaders, and we have conversations with everybody we work with, saying, what have you learned during this time? What has changed, and what do you absolutely not want to revert back to? That's going to take work, because we're elastic. We bounce back because the tension was released. For me, what becomes critical moving forward is don't lose the intentionality around people. Step one, let's retain the intentionality. And I think what we've seen is one of the most powerful, Andy mentioned the 12 essentials of creating employee experience, our model. But for me, the essential of shared purpose, bringing people into the bigger picture, letting people understand their impact, is the thing that ignites and switches people on, understand how they are contributing. Even if you are remote, you're able to be enthused by what you're doing because you're reporting back or feeding back enthusiastically on your impact. That then will culminate in all the others being potentially positively impacted in terms of communication and knowledge flow and innovation. But if people are not on board because they care and they understand why they matter and why you matter, it's going to be very difficult. And I think that for me is a key focus and a core intention through this and past this, is being aligned in terms of purpose.
Brilliant.
I couldn't agree more. I think we have to have something that everybody's showing up to contribute to every single day. I think for me, the one thing around employee experience that we can't lose sight of is employee experience. So often in times of pandemonium and pandemic, we think, oh, business critical, we have to keep the business alive, and we throw out all the people stuff and we stop focusing on the people stuff. But if we come back to where we started with human beings are the source of everything a company does, you can't lose focus on the employee experience just because times are tough.
Yeah. And just again to reiterate, because I think some people might use the label employee experience differently to the way you intend it. The employee experience is not how much you get out of the employees. It's not about productivity and efficiency and systems and management and control. The employee experience is, what does it feel like to work here? And do I like working here? Do I want to work here? Yeah, so let me throw back to you guys for final word then. If employee experience is the most important thing, and I genuinely do, apologies to everybody else I've interviewed, I think this is the most important thing to focus on, because if you get this wrong, I think everything else just falls apart. Just give us, you guys are fantastic in the way that you do this, just give us some final words of wisdom for leaders. If a leader is watching this, what should they do? And Brad, I'm going to give Andy the last word, so you go first.
So, okay, a word for leaders. A question we get asked often is, how do I motivate? How do I excite, enthuse at a distance? And what we're finding, leaders are also exhausted. I mean, we know the amount of pressure, amount of stress. If you're exhausted, it's very difficult to be creative. But this is a time where we need to be potentially more creative and innovative than ever before. We are seeing unbelievable creativity coming through at the moment. The thing that I encourage leaders to do is invite and make it safe for the people you lead to ideate, to innovate, to be creative. That in itself is motivating. When I'm being tapped into to come up with cool stuff and suggest it, I feel more on board. I feel more involved. I feel more valued, and I'm excited. I'm not just crunching numbers or doing whatever my job is. That is motivating. Not rah-rah and watch this video and let people get excited, but let them take the burden of creativity off you as well as a leader. Involve everybody.
I love that. I love that. Andy, final word to you.
There are no neutral moments. In absolutely every single moment, people are either being switched on and grown, or they're being switched off and depleted. And as a leader, which of those moments are you creating, and with what frequency, and with what intensity, and with what intentionality are you creating that people are being switched on and grown and not switched off and depleted?
Wow. Well, no, that thought has hit me between the eyes, Andy, because I'm thinking there are a few members of my team I haven't contacted in a little while. I really hope that not contacting them has been good for them, but then that puts me in a bad light. So I think I'm going to have to make a few phone calls as soon as I switch off this webinar. Guys, thank you so much. I knew this would be a great conversation. You guys do such great work, and I hope that companies are beginning, as we ease out of lockdown and we start to get back into business, that I hope people realize just how important employee experience is, and I hope they get hold of you to help them do an even better job of it than they can at the moment. So, Brad, Annie, thank you for your time. People, read their book. Read their book. You won't regret it. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Graeme.
Thank you. Take care of each other. Ciao.